We got some friends coming down after this.
Yeah.
Taking down us, and I'm on the off-road.
Beautiful. And I literally just discovered yesterday, I went to the class. I didn't know that existed. We go down there like,
I'll tell you, when the tide's out, it's incredible. But when the tide comes in, it's better than the other side. Swimming-wise, it's like swimming. It's fin. And we get the best of both worlds. We can get on either side. It's great. So yeah, we went out to Dawson actually twice last week. Fire. It was just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
the flats extended
Yes, Cape Beach. Yes, Cape Beach, yeah. So yeah, we have, again, New Orleans has obviously Rossa Beach on one side, and then the Bayside we got Skate Beach. Nice. It's just a big view.
So are you guys heading to the beach afterwards?
Yeah, so we have one of the permits, so we can drive out on the south side. And I got to tell you, once you've been out there, words can't describe how beautiful it is. I was just telling Rob, we took the girls out, my daughters out for dinner twice last week. It's just absolutely incredible. They're spoiled. We're all spoiled, really.
We are. I tell my children that, and they're like, oh,
Yeah, they don't know any better, right? But they leave and then they all come back.
and then they come back.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just wait.
goodness, it's my second job nowadays, you know? And I literally hang up the suit, you gotta open the garage, for standard practice, you know? And I so some guys don't have to do that. At some point this week. Good to go, right? Yeah.
Good afternoon and welcome, friends. And thank you for giving this summer Sunday afternoon to this important discussion. This is the second annual community conversation sponsored by the Interfaith Justice Committee of the Federated Church and Am Fellowship. And we've been working together for about 10 years now to educate and advocate on matters of social justice, seeking to follow the biblical injunction to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with God. I'm Rod MacDonald, a co-chair of the Justice Committee. Before we go any farther, I want to offer our big thanks to the Martin Luther King Action Team of Nauset Interfaith Association, without whom we probably wouldn't be having this program today. Also, thank you to Pastor Darren Morgan and the members of the church here for hosting, and to Mark Baker, our tech guru, for live streaming. For many of us, Cape Cod, along with being a beautiful place in God's creation, is a big white bubble. Whether we're wash ashores, lifelong residents, or summer visitors, we can be pretty oblivious to the realities of race on this sandy spit of land. But for neighbors of color, the Cape can tell another story, whether on the street, on the job, in school, seeking health care or housing, on the road, in restaurants, being black or brown or indigenous member of the community can be a harsh experience. Just this morning, a member of Am Fellowship was sharing with me her story of how a few years back she took a visiting black family to a local restaurant, and while they sat at their table, they heard the disparaging remarks from another table nearby, and she's still haunted by that experience. The goal of our conversation today is to listen and to learn. With us are just a few of the folks who are leaders in institutions or organizations whose work includes building more just, inclusive, and strong community on the Cape. You might ask, why aren't we seeing more persons of color as presenters or present. This is because we've listened to some leading spokespersons in the community who say they've grown tired of telling their stories again and again, and feeling little tangible evidence that things are really getting better. So we on the Justice Committee and the MLK Action Team believe that change must start with our institutions and with all of us. That has to include more awareness and conscious action on the part of us all. So our goal today is to listen and to learn, and not to confront. We need to learn and to be challenged to think and to act ourselves. So we'll be doing this today through a series of initial presentations from our panelists, followed by an opportunity for questions and answers. Those here in the pews have received index cards, or should have, for your questions during our question and answer period, and there are some pencils in the pews for you to use. Cards will be collected after those initial presentations during the Q&A period. And if you're live streaming, you have received an email address to which you can send questions during the program. Our moderator this afternoon is Jeff Spalter from both the Justice Committee and the MLK Action Team, just two of the hats he wears, and he'll be explaining more about our process as we go along. Now, before I briefly introduce our panel, you may have heard that there's an important election coming up. And the Justice Committee, along with you, we're sure, believes it's important that the voice of every eligible voter be heard. And to that end, we're again offering an opportunity to folks to send postcards to prospective voters. The program is called Every Voice, Every Vote, and it's connected to the Center for Common Ground. The goal is to send postcards to encourage voters in states where barriers to voting have led to racial gaps in voter participation. The postcards are nonpartisan, not directed to members of a particular party. And on your way out today, you can stop by the table downstairs in the large vestry room and pick up a packet of 10 cards or info about ordering more. Finally, it's my great privilege to introduce our distinguished panelists who thought I would never get around to it. Leslie Dominguez-Santos is the Human Rights Coordinator for Barnstable County. She works with the Human Rights Advisory Commission to uphold and protect the rights of residents and visitors, to increase community understanding and support for the rights of all individuals across Cape Cod. She has a long career of community-based work and advocacy, especially with Latinx and immigrant populations. A mother of three, she has received the Distinguished Alumni Award from the VC School of Social Work. Scott MacDonald is Orleans Chief of Police. He served the community for 25 years, beginning as a patrolman and being promoted to chief in 2012. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy, lives with his wife and 4 daughters in Brewster. Leo Blandford, clinical social worker, is Director of Health Equity and Community Impact for Outer Cape Health Services. He's worked in community outreach through a full range of primary and behavioral health, substance abuse, and community social services with folks from Plymouth to P-Town. He's also worked with the Red Cross and numerous other organizations. Rob Galibois is District Attorney for Cape Cod and the Islands. Elected in November 2022, he has worked to introduce new programs of community engagement, including one aimed at combating human trafficking. In the past, he has worked as an assistant DA for the Cape. He later opened his own law firm and represented many individuals, including 15 homicide cases. He lives in Barnstable with his wife. They have 2 sons. Rob says he has been guided by this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So please join me in welcoming these folks this afternoon. And now I'll turn the program over to my good friend Jeff Spalter, our moderator.
Thank you, Rod, and good afternoon, everyone. When I grow up, I hope to be as eloquent as Rod. As Rod said, my name is Jeff Spalter, and I'd also like to thank you all for being here, and a special thanks to our panelists. Our earlier prayers for clouds seem to have been answered. As our plan for this second community conversation came into focus, we quickly identified who we'd like to have join us today. Those on the front lines of addressing racism, because those are the ones most likely to see it and engage with it on the Cape. It's those who are integral to our criminal justice system, those who are routinely called to address racial injustices, and those who see the inequity and care to some. We didn't have to ask twice. All of these leaders, the folks you see up here, responded so fast that they join us. It was overwhelming. Okay, full transparency. One of the panelists was hesitant at first and wanted some clarification, as Rod indicated, why this program had such limited participation from people of color, which was a bit of a concern. As Rod shared with you, our black and brown friends and colleagues have grown a bit weary of carrying the ball to address racism. And despite the work that we've done and the sharing and teaching and work that they've done, they still don't see an impact on their daily lives. So they ask, what are you going to do? When we shared that the lack of people of color was by design, that we, as a white community, were taking action in response to our friends, it was game on. So here we are. And now for me, this is an example of where the term privilege kicks in, because all of us in the white community can decide whether or not we want to do more or do anything to address racism or racial inequality. And whether we do or not, our lives are not really going to be impacted. That's our privilege. We can just walk away. Whether or not we take action to help make the world a better place for people of color and for everyone, we'll be fine, but our friends will not. So with that, we asked our panelists to consider 4 questions in their opening remarks. How does racism present to your organization on Cape Cod? What is your organization doing to bring greater racial equity to the Cape, and what barriers are there? What are your ideas for future programs and possibilities to address racism on the Cape? And what can we as individuals do to make a difference and to help them? So with all of that as background, you're probably wondering, when are we going to let them talk? So what I'd like to do now is invite Leslie to come up and kick off the speakers. And then we'll pass off to Scott, and then Leo, and then Rob. Okay. Thank you, Leslie.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Leslie Dominguez-Santos. Soy la coordinadora de derechos humanos para el condado de Barnstable. Y es un placer estar con ustedes hoy. Does racism exist on Cape Cod? Yes. Yes, it does. Is it present everywhere? In schools, businesses, housing, banking, policing, healthcare? Yes. Yes, it is. My name is Leslie Dominguez-Santos, and I am the Human Rights Coordinator for Barnstable County. In this position, I have the distinct honor and the great tragedy of hearing and holding the stories of racist incidents on Cape Cod. The Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Commission has been in existence since 2005. Several of our members are here today, actually. The Commission is part of our local county government. The Commission's main purpose is community education around human rights. This includes hosting the Human Rights Academy for students across Cape Cod, as well as participating in forums like these addressing human rights issues. However, another aspect of the Commission's work is to receive intakes from the community about discriminatory practices that they have experienced. People call us, or they connect through our website to work through incidents that have happened to them. We listen, we support, and then we connect individuals to resources that can help them. Referrals range from local organizations to MCAD, which is the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination, and to the Attorney General's office. We are not lawyers, but our support truly helps individuals across Cape Cod. In this role of receiving intakes, we hear about incidents, large and small. We hear about incidents ranging from microaggressions to physical assault, and everything in between. We hear about incidents in many sectors and across multiple populations. We hear about things that happen across all 15 towns of Barnstable County. Federal and state laws protect people against discrimination and harassment. Legal parameters in these laws identify protected classes, so the question of who, and specific areas or sectors, so the question of where. The Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Commission receives intakes related to all of the protected classes and all of the issue areas. Some of the protected classes that we've received intakes about include individuals with a disability, people who are being questioned about their veteran status or their LGBTQIA identification. However, every year, the majority of our intakes are related to race-based occurrences. In fact, every intake I have received this summer is related to race. I'm going to say that again. Every single intake I have received this summer has been related to a racial bias incident. I want to be clear that our intake numbers are small. A lot of people don't even know that the Human Rights Commission exists. Other people are afraid to call us. They're afraid to speak out. They're afraid of retaliation. So our data cannot be seen as definitive, but our numbers do indicate trends in the community. And a recurring trend that we see is across all of these areas, schools, housing, employment, policing, healthcare, all of them, racial bias incidents continue to occur. So what does that look like? It looks like the kid who was brave enough to go trick-or-treating for the first time without his parents, and he was followed and called the N-word. It is school bus rides with elementary school kids where racial taunts are a daily occurrence. It is differential school discipline where the problem kids are all students of color and they get in trouble when they drop their pencil or they spill their milk, but their white counterparts do not. It is school sporting events, which include racial taunts, slurs, do-rags, and sometimes even blackface. In the housing world, it's people being denied rental housing because their skin is the wrong color or their name is funny. And in the housing world, it's also the practice of steering buyers of color into specific neighborhoods. We hear about differential treatment in the world of health, being unallowed to make decisions for your loved one because you're an angry Black woman. We hear of patients and co-workers who are unwilling to be treated by or work with medical professionals of color. I don't want that doctor or nurse or technician. In employment, Microaggressions play a big role. This includes differential treatment on a daily basis in promotional decisions, vacation time, and more. We've also heard of several situations where a person of color finally speaks up and out about the microaggressions that they have experienced, and they are the ones that get labeled a troublemaker. With the police, we do hear about traffic stops where someone forgot to use their turn signal, or they're driving with a broken taillight, or an expired inspection sticker, all of which are things that I have done. People of color on Cape Cod continue to report that driving while black and brown is a hazard. And finally, yes, we do hear of racial taunting that turns into physical aggression and assault. It does happen here. Jobs are lost, housing is denied, healthcare is withheld, students drop out of school. People of color are harmed over and over again. Yes, racism happens here every day. We have to do better. We have to help our systems to be inclusive and welcoming and supportive for all. Please do not walk out of this church and pat yourself on the back for attending a racial justice talk and checking your, "oh yes, I care" box. Instead, ask yourself, how can I do better? What can I do? How can I educate myself more? How can I make a difference? Everyone in this room should know how to be an active bystander. If you see something, say something. That includes online spaces. Take an active bystander workshop. Work with your local school. Work with your local police department to support their inclusion efforts. Help to fundraise for and host educational activities in your community. Support your colleagues of color in their work environments. Model kindness. Lose the fear. And again, if you see something, say something. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Scott MacDonald. I have the privilege of serving this community in Orleans here. I'd like to talk a little bit about policing and what is our primary responsibility as law enforcement officials. That is to protect your constitutional and civil rights. And how do we do that? What is constitutional policing? Think of a Venn diagram. Okay, so I want you to sound policies and procedures, training to those policies and procedures, and here's the most important one, supervision, the accountability. I'd like to talk a little bit about that component of that. Supervision. We want to make sure that we have trained supervisors overseeing the actions of our officers. More importantly, supervision also allows us to collect and analyze data. We have, in most police departments on the Cape, have robust records management systems that allow us to collect a lot of data. Every time you come in contact, whether it's a motor vehicle stop, a motor vehicle accident, an officer responds to your resident for any reason, they're going to collect your information. That goes into our records management system. As it relates to this conversation, that allows us to analyze that information, specifically with motor vehicle stops. Each and every year, my deputy chief provides me a report on every single motor vehicle stop that we conduct in the community of Orleans. So how do we really analyze that information? Are we doing a good job? Are there trends or policy revisions that we need to take a look at? What is the benchmark that we should be looking at? The last time we were provided with a community benchmark was in 2004 from Northeastern University, which said our benchmark in the community of Orleans is 8% non-white disparity. Okay? So 92%, according to this report, are white drivers. So we use that as a benchmark to determine whether or not, again, are there trends, policy revisions, a specific officer, that the numbers are just off a little bit. Where am I going with this, folks? First of all, did anyone know that we collect that kind of data, that we analyze that data? It's really, really important that we do so. And it's not just the community of Orleans. I would say the majority, we have Chief Mike Anderson here from Chatham. Mike, thank you for being here. They do the same thing in Chatham. Okay, so it's important that we're constantly monitoring the actions of our officers. I'd like to talk a little bit about the experience that I've had working with the Conversations with Police Chiefs, which is a branch of the Martin Luther King Action Team. It's been 2 or 3 years, Jeff, that we've been involved in this. And when I was invited to participate, I came into this with, I'm going to defend the cops. That's what I'm going to do. Because I don't work with racist cops. Doesn't happen. I've been doing this 34 years. I have never worked with a racist cop. And that's how these meetings started. And a team member, person of color, would tell a story, something that bothered them, something that happened to them. And I'd say, no. You were driving uninspected, that's why you were stopped. Taillight, get it fixed. You wouldn't get stopped. Boy, did I learn a lot. Boy, did I learn a lot over the next several months. Instead of being defensive, I listened. I listened to the stories. We talk a lot about, in our group, about looking at things through a different lens. Someone else's lens. What are they experiencing? A quick story that came up. I can't remember what community it was, but a person of color was stopped. And the officer approached the vehicle, and they had an interaction, and the officer asked this individual, "Is the vehicle registered to you?" And the operator was offended by that question. Why would you ask me that? Why would you think this wasn't my vehicle? And from my perspective, and from the officer's perspective, that wasn't why that question was asked. It's a process question. If we know that the vehicle is registered to the operator, it allows us to perform our duties more efficiently and quickly. But when we heard that, when we heard through a different lens, it changed everything. We spoke with the officer. We had a meeting where we brought some younger officers into a conversation. And they heard that. He said, "Chiefs, we had no idea. We didn't want to offend anyone." That is just an example, just one example of what we learned through our discussions with the police chiefs. I have learned the most important lesson is to listen, not be so defensive. Over the last 2 some odd years, we have established this level of trust amongst this team where we can be very open and honest with our conversations. And that's how you learn. Moving forward, our biggest challenge, ladies and gentlemen, we look to you for help. How do we reach the masses? How do we get this message out? I want to help. Chief Anderson wants to help. We're all in, 100%. What do we do? What do we do to make those positive community connections, constitutional policing. That is our job. Protecting your civil rights, that is our job. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Leo. I work as a clinical social worker in the healthcare system here on Cape Cod, and I work for a federally qualified health center. So there's 4 of those within Barnstable County, including IHS, which is Indian Health Services, and then Cape Cod Healthcare kind of serves as the umbrella for all of Barnstable County. And so the reason why I say that, because when we are talking about how racism presents to an organization in Cape Cod, what the healthcare system does is look at the data. And so what the data says, if we are looking at CDC data that was generated from a report by Cape Cod Healthcare, which every 3 years does what's called a Community Health Needs Assessment, CHNA, CHNA. So that is a document that any of us can look up online to get more data information about how healthcare is reported within Barnstable County. So what that report would say is that if you are brown or black in Barnstable County, you are dying at a higher, faster rate than white, non-Hispanic residents. And so, if we are looking at how does racism impact organizations, if I'm coming from a healthcare perspective, what I'm saying is brown and black residents in Barnstable County are dying faster from all cause, and so what they look at is all-cause mortality rates. So cancer, cardiovascular disease, obesity, hypertension, all cause, so self-injury. So if we are looking at all reasons why people die in Barnstable County, if you are black or brown, you are dying at a faster rate. So what do we do about that within Barnstable County? I think that can be overwhelming for any person, much less any organization. So a lot of what we are doing is working with federal partners, working with state partners around how to maneuver through this data. So as a clinical social worker, what I'm doing from an academic background is looking at what can be done at a micro level, at an individual level, what can be done at a meso level in family and community, and what can be done at a macro level, right? So how can work be done at a state or federal level? And so a little bit of my work involves a little bit of all of those things. And so from a clinical mental health clinician, I see people on an individual basis. That a little bit informs then how I participate in the community. So I sit on 10 or 15 committees, commissions, boards around Barnstable County just to share information, because what I'm seeing, what I'm observing is when we are talking about healthcare, we don't have a very good handle on how we define health and well-being as a community. If we look at our history whether it's within Barnstable County, across the country, what we see is that a lot through history, health and well-being has been dictated to populations. And so I think the best example within Barnstable County is if we look at our Wampanoag, if we look at the Wampanoag Nation, if we look at our indigenous population, they are dying at the fastest rate in Barnstable County than any other racial ethnic demographic. And so when we are considering that within the narrative of American culture, if we are talking about where the Pilgrims landed, if we are talking about Thanksgiving, we are talking about the Wampanoag Nation. And so if they are dying at the fastest rate, they are also the smallest population by percentage in Barnstable County. So here, I think that when we are looking at history of the country, when we are looking at history of where we live at in Barnstable County on Cape Cod, we are still perpetuating a lot of the harms that I think have originated around this area. And so what are we doing to help to resolve some of those things? And so, if we are, again, looking at a micro, meso, and macro level, how do we as individuals work towards that? And I think a lot of that, there is so much information that we have these days. So if we are looking at at self-awareness, if we are looking at a possibility to explore self, a possibility to listen to how others have defined health and well-being throughout our county, I think that offers a wealth of mutual benefit. And so I think a lot of what my indicators have been in my work has been how, in doing work, where is there mutual benefit? Where is there benefit for me? And in my work, where is there benefit for community? So if I'm working towards self-exploration around what race means to me, what racism means to me, how can that inform then the work that I'm doing going forward? How can that inform the work that I am, the content or context that I'm sharing when I'm sitting in various boards, when I'm sitting in various commissions, when I'm sitting and have an opportunity to collaborate with other partners? And so I think a big step that healthcare is doing these days is to look beyond what historically has been blinders on. My job is to focus on biological health, my job is to focus on mental health. I think more and more healthcare is starting to realize when we broaden those blinders, that then we can see where health is impacted across all spectrums, right? So if we are talking about policing, if we are talking about the legal system, if we are talking about the education system, if we are talking about all of these various systems, they are all linked by health and well-being. And so what we are seeing more and more, if somebody has stress because of housing, if somebody has stress because they don't have transportation to get to school, to get to work, if they don't have access to nutritional foods, if they don't have access to all these things that contribute towards health, then it is contributing negatively towards their health, right? It's contributing towards cardiovascular disease, it's contributing towards high blood pressure, it's contributing towards all these various aspects around how health is measured. And so in the healthcare system, there is more awareness around what that looks like, and with that awareness then comes a little bit more willingness to collaborate across specialties. So not only specialties within the medical field, but specialties within what makes up community. And so if we are talking about faith-based organizations, if we are talking about the Human Rights Advisory Commission within the county, if we are talking about the legal system, the policing system, what do those relationships look like? How can they help to inform how to contribute towards healthier communities? And so I think right now, in the midst of all the hardships that we are facing, I still see glimpses of hope. When we are sitting here on a Sunday afternoon with the chief of police from Orleans, with the district attorney, and then with members from the municipality, you know, how much hope there is still in recognizing these opportunities for growth, these opportunities for mutual benefit. So I appreciate your time and looking forward to further discussion.
Somebody leave a pair of glasses? Hi, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the Interfaith Justice Committee for allowing us to appear here today, and the MLK Action Group. And my fellow panelists, we have some incredible talent up here on the stage. I also want to recognize a couple people in the audience right now. Lynn Rhodes, the president of the Cape Cod NAACP, is in the audience. Lynn Rhodes. And as mentioned by Chief MacDonald, we have Chief Anderson here from the Chatham Police Department. So thank you very much. Before I get into my unprepared remarks, I wish you could see what I can see right now. This is amazing, looking out here. I mean, we're full. This is a Sunday afternoon in the summer, and you're all here to address racism on Cape Cod. That's truly incredible. So thank you for coming and being a part of all this. We were posed a series of questions to try to address in our opening remarks. One had to do with how does your office or entity basically get involved in incidents of racism? While being the district attorney, it's probably no secret that often it occurs when someone has some criminal charges brought against them. I am now in, I think, month 19 of my first term. I say first term. And within the first few months of being in office, we had some high-profile race-based incidents. We had one somewhat local to this area of a black boy nearly being drowned by a white boy. We had a man on Main Street in Hyannis start off by verbally assaulting and then taking it further against another person. That was captured on video, and that video went viral. We had signs tacked up on telephone poles in Oak Bluffs, considerable African-American population in Oak Bluffs. And the signs were placed outside of black-owned businesses at about 3 o'clock in the morning. We also had an incident in Mashpee, speaking of the tribe, of drawings of certain hate symbols on the building of the Mashpee Wampanoag Language Reclamation Center. Those are the high-profile matters. Last summer, about 6 months into office, I was at an event and I was asked, what's something that you've experienced so far that you didn't necessarily expect when you were coming into office? And I could answer that question quite quickly. The volume of hate incidents. I had no idea. So while those are just some of the high-profile matters I've described, sadly, we have all too many cases in my office addressing hate across the spectrum, from the schools to adults in our communities. What are we trying to do about it? We try to work with as many outfits that we can possibly work with. We work with outfits known as No Place for Hate in Barnstable, No Place for Hate in Falmouth. We've established a working group to address hate in the schools. And we've developed a DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, that never existed before in this office, to try to look internally within our own office. And a couple of the goals of the DEI committee are to try to set up trainings for our own staff so we can make certain identifications, and help us candidly with recruitment, and try to pull in different backgrounds into our office that, quite honestly, I think will make us a better office. A couple things resonated really well when I was out campaigning and wherever I went. One of them had to do with the need for the office to engage more deeply in the community. No one really knew what the district attorney's office did, and certainly a lot of people didn't know anyone that worked in the DA's office. And a couple different things that I've thought of to try to address that is, and I'm going to get to one of my asks now that I bothered Jeff about. When I took office, I learned something that I did not realize during the course of the campaign, and quite honestly, shame on me, I should have made it an issue, because it's a considerable issue. There's a district on the other side of the state known as the Northwest District. Has anyone here heard of Northampton, Mass? Okay. So Northampton's like their biggest city or town within that district. What's interesting is the Northwest DA's office has an annual population of about 260,000 people. That's almost my district, our district, to a person. Between Barnstable County, Dukes County, and Nantucket County, on an annual basis, we hover between 260 and 265,000 people. Our summer population, of course, explodes, where we have approximately about 1 million extra people over the course of 3 months that the Northwest District just doesn't see. And what is truly amazing is, shortly after I took office, I learned that, my budget was $5.5 million. Their budget was $8.5 million. 60% larger, $3 million more. And candidly, we've been trying to make as best efforts as we can as in office to petition the powers that be to increase our funding so we can provide the same level of services that the Northwest District is able to provide its constituents. And we've fallen short. The gap's actually grown. We're at 3.2 million right now. So why am I bringing this up? This fall, we are going to be putting a big push out there with the powers that be in Boston. And that big push is going to require, candidly, stakeholders in our community to get behind us, to try to increase that level of funding. What would we do with the extra money? A lot of things. In terms of addressing race issues or racism, in my mind, we have a disproportionate amount of hate incidences going on in our schools across the entire district. I would like to hire a plethora of licensed social workers to work formally in our office, but with the school districts across the Cape and the islands, just to help the schools themselves. They're trying to do what they can, but they could use certainly more additional resources. Another area which I would offer that you can help us out in our efforts is getting back to that need for deeper community engagement. I spoke about, should I be fortunate enough to win this position, I would create a new position within the office known as the Community Engagement Officer. And the exclusive responsibility of that position, or that person, was to be in our communities every single day, to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on and report directly back to me. As a staffer in our office keenly observed a while back, when you look at Cape Cod from the satellite, you see one Cape Cod. But as we all know, living here, there's at least 15 different Cape Cods for the 15 different towns, and often a lot more than that when you break it down to villages, because many of us tend to identify ourselves from the village that we come from within a given town. So we were able to create that position. I was honored that a particular staff person inside the office raised her hand when we announced that we were going to fill that position. Her name is Kelly Quealy. She had been working in the office for about 14 years. She is a Cape Codder for life, having been raised here in Cape Cod and is now raising her family here in Cape Cod. She joins us here today. She's right here, Kelly Quealy. So, yeah, thank you. My additional ask is this. I've tasked Kelly with a huge responsibility, and it's to create what we call the Community Coalition, and there's a chapter in every single town. We gave it a cute name and called it the DA and Us. And essentially what it is it's a coalition comprising of anywhere from 6 people to a dozen folks, depending on the size of the town. And we want all walks of life. We're interested in meeting with the people that have never engaged in civic work at all. We're looking to have quarterly meetings in person and then virtual, and a little bit of a hybrid situation. And again, as I just mentioned, this allows us to keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on in any particular community, and allowing us to delve deeply into each community, as I promised that I would do. So again, I really appreciate everyone taking the time here today, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing, for opening up, and for teeing this next part of the discussion up. Folks in the audience should have some index cards. If you have a question, if you would, we have some folks that will come down and collect those from you and pass them in, and we'll share the questions with our panelists, if that's okay. Whew, thank goodness. And we had a couple questions that were passed first. And actually, Leslie, can I start with you? Because you had shared what the Human Rights Commission does and some of the things you've seen. Question is, what are some of the typical outcomes from your intakes? What kind of happens?
All right, this is on? Great. That is a very good question, and it really depends on the intake. Sometimes there are people that call and just need to cry. I wasn't required to be a social worker to have this job, but, and I've been a macro social worker my whole life, and this is the most clinical social work job I've ever had. Because there's a lot of anger and hurt that sometimes people just need to get out. People need to be heard. And that's actually a really important thing that we do. We hear people, we listen. Sometimes there is a very direct thing that we can do. So the example that I gave about the school bus, there's this same school, and I'm sure that this happens on multiple school buses, but this particular bus in this particular community, the students of color were being called horrible names and nothing was being done about it. So what did I do? I called the principal of the school. I said, hey, what's going on the bus? And the principal actually dealt with the situation, and lo and behold, the racial taunting on the bus ended because the school administration was paying attention. There are times when somebody calls me and I go, whoa, you really need a lawyer. And we do not refer to specific lawyers unless somebody needs the assistance of legal aid. And then we refer them to the Hyannis office, South Shore Legal Aid. But there are times when I'm like, yeah, you really need a lawyer, I cannot help you. And then there's kind of the gray area where a lot of times I say, okay, let me reach out to members of our intake committee. Rick Draper's here in the audience. He's one of the brilliant minds that helps me. Because a lot of times people call and I'm like, wow, I don't know where to send you. Let me ask. And so I will reach out. All of our intakes remain anonymous, so Rick and other members do not know who it is that I am talking about. But I will say there is an individual, and they are having this experience. I won't say the town, the school, the business, none of that. But what would you suggest I do with this person in a case that is related to employment? And then they will all jump in, and I will put together a whole list of suggestions for an individual. Okay, here's 5 different avenues that you can take. And a lot of times that's all that people need. And then sometimes there are people that are gonna go file with MCAD or the Attorney General's office or DESC if it's an education issue. And they're like, whoa, Leslie, this form is really scary, and I will help walk them through the form. But again, we're not lawyers, and we don't try to be lawyers. We don't do investigation. I have called several of the chiefs of police to say, hey, there's an issue that you might want to pay attention to, and my experience has been nothing but wonderful with all of the chiefs. Every single one of them that I've worked with has been like, whoa, okay, I'm going to look into that. So it really does depend on the case. And some people, I talk to them for a 24-hour period, that's all they need. There's other intakes that we've been connected to for years.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next question is generic, and maybe I'll ask Chief MacDonald, and then we'll go on down the line if that's all right. Is racism on the rise on the Cape, or have we just ignored it in the past?
From my experience, I cannot say it's on the rise. We haven't had any particular complaints that has come into our organization or investigated any specific crimes. So as it pertains to Orleans, the answer would be no.
This response might get me in trouble in certain circles, but that's okay. Good trouble, as it's been said. I can't say whether or not, candidly, if it's on the rise. I can say, from my administration's perspective, again, being 19 months in, we're trying to identify it, and we're taking action. We have certainly been criticized by some in the community and outside our community for taking action. We've been labeled politely overreacting. My prosecutors, and perhaps me, have been accused of certain things, including engaging in reverse racism, which upon some contemplation, I decided staying on the high road and not justifying with a response. But again, I can't really say whether or not it's been on the rise. It's just, I think, a situation where the district attorney's office is taking action when it comes to our attention.
Thank you.
I would echo most of what the DA has just said. We ask ourselves that question sometimes in our intake committee. Are there more incidents happening, or are people more willing to speak out? And we don't know the answer. The number of intakes that we're receiving has gone up, but we're not sure why. Have people just found us, or is the situation worse? We honestly don't know.
It's a really hard question to answer because I think that when we are talking about racism, we are talking about an evolution of a concept, right? So if we are talking about, are we at a state where we are enslaving populations? Are we talking about segregation? Are we talking about what some have considered genocide of an indigenous population? Are we at that stage? I would say, no, we're not. But I think also what we have to contend with is how do we talk about racism? And do we even have a tolerance for the discomfort of talking about race? And I think that that has been heightened, because I think talking about race causes discomfort. And we as a culture do not like discomfort, and we push it away. And when we push those things away, so racism in general is trauma. And we are a nation rooted in trauma. And so if, would I describe that as an increase or not? I would say our nation is rooted in that. And so are we at a different place to talk about it? I would say, I hope so. But I think on an individual basis, we have to ask ourselves, how willing are we to tolerate the discomfort to talk about race? And so maybe that is a different question that I would invite.
That's great. Thank you all. And I'll be honest with you, I know moderators, they're impartial and all that other stuff, but I do have the microphone right now. I was really surprised by the response. My lack of data would have indicated that it was on the rise. And I suspect that maybe the term ignore wasn't right, but there's been a lack of awareness because we don't see a lot of differences. And so appreciate you all bringing these issues up so that we can talk about them and begin to address them and see where we can take it and make the world a bit better. So that was great. Thank you very much. Leo, if you don't mind holding the mic, there's a question. I think this one's for you. The disparities in mortality rates between BIPOC and white people are worse in Barnstable. Are the disparities in mortality rates between BIPOC and white people worse in Barnstable County than in any other Massachusetts county? If so, what do you think that indicates about the Cape?
I don't know what the rates are in the rest of the state, but I know, so what I neglected to talk about in my initial talk was around the macro work that we are doing. So on the macro level, there is an organization called the Health Equity Compact. Their focus is on legislation within Massachusetts and how to look at the health disparities within Massachusetts. And I'm proud to say that Massachusetts is probably one of the states that is leading the nation in this work. And so I think that there is some space there to acknowledge that this is hard work and this is work that Massachusetts is doing. So as far as Barnstable County goes, I don't know what the rates are in the rest of the county, and what the state is looking at is how the data is collected. And so one of the challenges, one of the barriers that I also neglected to talk about is how do we as a healthcare system collect data? And one of the challenges is collecting the data from individuals, because we are asking you, when you come to your primary care, we're asking about your race, we are asking about your income level, we are asking a lot of intrusive questions. And I think oftentimes there is a distrust of why does my healthcare provider need to know my income? Why do they need to know my race? And so there is a challenge across the state in collecting this data. Urban areas are better at it than we are. And so one of the ways that I would look at this is within Barnstable County, we have rural communities. Rural communities across the country fare worse in health outcomes than urban and suburban areas. One of the reasons for that is access to care. And I think I would guess that many of you have awareness around if you need to see a primary care and you don't have one, you're going to be on a wait list for many weeks, many months. Whether that is primary care, whether that's behavioral health. I think that we are a little bit better around substance use disorder supports. But some of that is resource allocation. Where do we have money to spend to attend to some of these disparities? So within Barnstable County, so I don't know the full answer to that because my focus is within Barnstable County. So I would say, I don't know what the trend is across the state, but across the nation, what I would say is the trend is that BIPOC populations have worse health outcomes than white non-Hispanic patients and residents, which is the push from a national level, which is the push from the state level. So I think I'll stop there. I hope that tended to the question.
Yeah, yes, it did. There's actually a bit of a follow-up. It's about barriers to health care. Is it more than just cost and access to insurance?
The simple answer is yes. The more complicated answer is, and it has a lot to do, so I'm going to nerd out a little bit into some theories that I hope is contributing towards the answer to this question. So Abraham Maslow is a 20th century psychologist. He's widely known for his theory around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So essentially what his theory says is if you have your basic needs met, if you have your physiological needs met, if you have kind of all the needs of what we've deemed for human beings as met, then the pinnacle is self-actualization, that you have then the opportunity to experience your full potential as an individual. We know now that it's not necessarily a hierarchy. You don't achieve level 1, achieve level 2 until you come to this pinnacle. And we are learning that Maslow actually got this theory from indigenous populations in the middle of the country. And what he neglected to recognize was that when an individual has the potential, when an individual has the wherewithal to explore their potential as an individual, it benefits the community. If the community then, if an individual is working on their well-being to their potential, it contributes towards the community's ability to attain its potential. So within Barnstable County, what I would say is I don't know that we have a lot of individuals who are seeking what their full potential is. And so then what does that do for the resources within Barnstable County? And how I would answer that is within the healthcare field, we are exploring resources that are not traditionally pertained to the medical field. So what we are looking at is produce prescriptions, right? So I think that we know that, from a clinical health, social worker perspective, we know that if you have adequate sleep, if you have adequate nutrition, that contributes towards your health. We don't have the means to tend to everybody for their medical needs. So we don't have the infrastructure for the healthcare that we need. We have varying infrastructure for transportation. We have varying infrastructure for food services. But where I think when we have the opportunity to be creative around how we provide medical interventions, I think then we can explore a little bit about the access. Because right now we just don't have the infrastructure to maintain a population of what I think is close to 250,000 people. We just don't have the infrastructure because of geographical barriers. So I come from the town of Wellfleet. 65% of Wellfleet is National Seashore. We can't expand into housing, so we have to be creative around what housing looks like. We have to be creative around how we use some of these resources. And so I've actually forgotten the question. I think it was around resources and how to access.
I think the summary is the top of Maslow's chart is health insurance.
It's not health insurance, but I think it's how do we define health and well-being as an individual so that we can participate as a community together in defining that.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Chief, can I come back to you? Thank you, Leo. He says, I was here several years ago for a similar meeting. All but 2 Cape Cod police chiefs were here. They said they would work sensitivity training. How has that gone? How successful has it been? Has the effort been successful, and has it shown up in the data?
So I believe it was in 2020, December of 2020, that police reform came in. And part of that was mandated in-service training, which is annual training for our police officers. And part of that was that type of sensitivity training, understanding. But I think the informal conversations go a lot further. And as I mentioned earlier, that, you know, I'm listening. Chief Anderson's listened. Your police chiefs are listening. We are having those conversations with our officers. The action team that I participate and Mike participates in, we're taking that back to our officers. We're having those conversations, understanding what it's like to be on the other side of that motor vehicle stop. Okay, and that's really, really important that we do so. So yes, I think that we have improved dramatically on the training and those informal conversations that I think will go a long way.
Great, thank you, Chief. Any add-ons?
I would simply echo from my personal experience that all the police chiefs, as far as I'm concerned, and their patrol officers, had every right to have a little bit of, harboring a little bit of, if not curiosity, distrust when I took office. I was a prosecutor a long time ago. I was in the DA's office in the mid-90s, left in the early 2000s. For many of those that are working in law enforcement right now here in the Cape, that was basically a generation ago. So they didn't know me. So when I took office, I can understand why there might have been a little bit of a holding of the breath. But I would like to offer, for whatever it's worth, that over the past 18, 19 months that I've been in office, the line of communications between me specifically and my team and the Cape Chiefs and their teams has been extraordinary. I can reach out to any of them, any time of the day with any issue, and they get back to me right away. So I offer that up so you understand that we truly are trying to work in partnership, of course, on issues regarding potential racism going on, but all other matters that involve public safety. I think it's important that you hear that.
That's great, thank you. Leslie, can I direct this one to you? Housing. Is anyone collecting data on bias as it affects housing for BIPOC folks? And is anyone working at addressing the problem outside of the overall housing shortage on the Cape?
So housing is probably the most challenging area that we work in. When somebody calls to say that they've been discriminated against in housing, I'm ready to reach out to my team and figure out how we can support this person, and all they want is housing. And so I can come back to them with a list of suggestions about how to address the discrimination that they experienced, but they've disappeared because they're trying to find housing. So I do track. So again, I mentioned that our data can't be super conclusive, but I do track every single time that somebody calls to tell me about housing discrimination. Or Lynn Rhodes calls and says, hey, I spoke to somebody who experienced housing discrimination. So I am trying to track all of this. I know that, I'm trying to be very careful about what I say. There are landlords that are known and landlords that I've never heard of, because there are some companies that are more supportive than others. Housing's really tricky, because even if you are middle class and white with a standard good job, you're a nurse, you're a firefighter, you're a police officer, you're not gonna find housing easily on Cape Cod. And so when you add on, you're a person of color, you're born in a different country, your religion is different than the majority here on Cape Cod, it's really hard. And I'm sorry, that's not a good answer, but I struggle in the housing realm a lot because there's not an easy answer. There's not an easy solution. But do I track it? Sure, I do. Is there a lot of movement with housing data? No, because nobody can find housing. So, sorry.
No, thank you, thank you. And again, the candor, your candor is what really makes the difference today, and sharing that with us, so we really do appreciate that. This one, we can go around the room if that's okay. So, wearing the hat that you currently have on, what would be the one or two things that you would like to do that would have the biggest impact to address racial inequality on the Cape? You want to pass the mic around for a minute first?
I'm going to start, and I'm going to say get in the schools. It's such a problem.
I have all kinds of thoughts, so I'm trying to pick which one to share. I think where I will share is, so I'm a member of the Barnstable County Human Rights Advisory Commission, and I know that we have open seats either on the commission or as a town liaison, and how important it is for the commission to receive information from communities where there can be some information sharing, where there can be connection and relationship. So I would say, if it's not for the municipality to volunteer in your community with an organization that you feel is doing good work in this arena. And and I can't tell you which one, because I think that is a little bit of self-exploration on your part as to why it's important to you and how you would like to participate.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in real quick and say that we need several Outer Cape town liaisons. Several of the towns down here on Outer Cape do not have a voice at our table.
I would join Leslie in saying in our schools, and I guess I would reiterate how we want to make that effort as an office by having that ability to employ some licensed social workers to work directly with our school officials to address racism in the schools. Another area in our line of work as a prosecuting office, we talk a lot about accountability, and I'm now going to get to my second of two asks for the afternoon, first being the budget. But my second ask is in regards to the backdrop of accountability. The civil rights statute here in Massachusetts. If you are charged with violating someone's civil rights, it's a misdemeanor. The maximum penalty is up to 1 year in jail. And there's a fine associated as well. I would like to see at some point, of course I'll say first term, but it may take a little longer than that because I'm learning a lot in this position. Things move a lot slower than I would like. But that's something I would like to see amended to become a felony. And that's something that I need to work with our Cape delegation to try to convince them, although candidly I don't think it'll take much convincing there. I think they'll wrap their arms around that. But I'm just learning more and more about the process of trying to amend laws. So that would be my second wish, to amend the civil rights violation statute to make it a felony.
From the law enforcement perspective, we need to build community trust. And we do that through opportunities to connect with you. And that is very challenging. By the nature of what we do in law enforcement, we're normally responding to some sort of conflict. Okay, that's not a great opportunity to connect in positive ways. A few months ago, the Nauset School District held a multicultural event here in town. When I found out about it, I threw my uniform on and went down on a Sunday, and it was an opportunity to connect. And it was a great opportunity, and I made such good friends, and it was fantastic. And I can't remember the woman's name that put on the event, but I said, next year, can the police department come put our tent up? Can we have uniformed officers here seizing that opportunity to connect with all of these people? That is really what it's about, establishing trust with your police departments. We need you to feel comfortable coming into that front door at the police department. And if you have a concern, if you were treated unfairly, we need to know about it. We spoke a little bit about, is racism on the rise? I don't know. If you don't come in, if you have something that's bothering you, you need to come in and speak to us so we can properly look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Can we stay with you? There's a great question that came in. It'd be very appropriate right now if I could find it. I'm going to move to the one that comes right after that. It's also for you. That's okay. And you hit on it already, but maybe a few more examples. What are you, the police, doing differently as a result of listening and learning? Can you share some examples?
I did touch on a little bit about those informal conversations, and they are taking place. Understanding what it's like to be on the receiving end. But I will say this, ladies and gentlemen, it really goes both ways. And I mentioned this during our discussions with our action team, that I'm listening to you. Okay, I'm learning. We will change the way we do business in some occasions from those conversations. But you need to learn from us also the challenges of what these officers face day in and day out. Why did they walk up to my vehicle that way? Why were they bladed in a certain stance? Well, it's for their safety. It goes both ways. You need to understand what these officers face. We need to understand what it's like being on the receiving end of that interaction with a police officer. Did I get that? Did I answer that question? Okay.
Touched on it.
Touched that.
There's if I can share another example that came out of some of the work that we've done. It's in the way that the chiefs of the police respond to calls about suspicious behavior.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great example. So one of the things, and this really, affects our communication specialists, our dispatchers. So often we'll get calls at the police department. There is a suspicious person outside. Okay, sir or ma'am, why are they suspicious? Well, they're a black person. I can tell you this, honestly, in years past, we would dispatch a cruiser to that. And really, how unfair is that? So now we're training our dispatchers. Why are they suspicious? Specifically tell us why they are suspicious. So then we can really determine whether or not this requires a police response. Again, think about being on the receiving end of that. You're an individual of color just standing on the sidewalk, and a police cruiser pulls up, a uniformed police officer gets out and starts questioning you. Okay? Now, I always look at, well, did the officer do anything wrong? No, they were dispatched to a call. They didn't do anything wrong. But again, looking at it from the other end, wow, how wrong is that? So we had taken action. We are now training our dispatchers. We got to dig a little bit deeper before we dispatch a cruiser to that call.
And really the beauty of that, and not asking the question, is this your car? It takes some of the tension out of the system. It reduces an interface that could lead to a bad outcome. And so that's great to hear. So thank you for that. I found the question. You're not going to cut my pay, are you? I'm a little off. At least some of our police and attorneys and healthcare professionals were specifically selected and trained to be dominant, to take charge of a situation and control the behavior of other people. Please describe the policies and training you have implemented or would recommend be implemented to your colleagues or employees to moderate this habit and be reactive when working with Black, Indigenous, and other people of color.
Wow, there's a lot to that. So
I said it was a good question.
I can, so bear with me on this one. So yeah, initially when we're trained at the police academy, we are trained to come in and control a situation. And I'm okay with that. We need to be able to do that. Because ladies and gentlemen, sometimes these are very dangerous situations. Sometimes these individuals are armed. So we have to be very careful how we approach these things and, controlling. I like the word controlling, not dominating. Controlling a situation. But once that situation is under control, now we de-escalate the situation, right? That's a word and I've used a lot in our profession in the last couple of years, right? And a lot of training has come into law enforcement. Let's calm things down and understand what's going on. So, yeah, we're trained to control. But once we have it under control, let's really de-escalate it and find some sort of resolution to whatever we're investigating.
Thank you.
I don't know how many dominant attorneys we have in the office, but one thing that we always have to be cognizant of is that we wield tremendous authority. I mean, we oftentimes have the ability to take your liberty away from you, and that's quite powerful. And we have to be, of course, very careful in how we proceed. The way to try to institute some safeguards, of course, is to try to maintain some data that we can go back and analyze to make sure we are treating people as equally as we possibly can. It's a little frustrating coming into this office because the database that is used by all DA's offices across the state, it's referred to as DAMIAN, can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's DAMIAN, is horrible, candidly. It doesn't have many fields that we can use to try to collect the data that we feel is necessary to make sure we are treating everyone uniformly across the board, but we're trying to do it as best we can. And we periodically go back and try to look to see that we are, in fact, treating people as fairly as possible. So I guess the best answer I can offer is try to capture as much data as possible and periodically review it to make sure you are treating people equally.
So it's about de-escalation, right? I sat for many years on the board of the Duffy Health Center, and they support individuals who are homeless, dealing with substance use issues, and other vulnerable populations. And one of my favorite things was that they had a team of social workers that went out with the Barnstable Police Department on a regular basis. I actually don't know if other police departments do that, but social workers, we unite, we take over the world. I mean, I don't know, but we as social workers, we do help to de-escalate situations. I did mention earlier active bystander training. I know that school resource officers are participating in active bystander training, and again, it's both the de-escalation and it's the addressing that this is a really tough situation and how can I make a difference? And there's different approaches, right? So I'm not a super direct person. I hate conflict, but I'm very good at distraction. That's one of the tools in active bystander. So, if these two guys are going at it and it's really tense, I'm going to go and spill my coffee right in the middle of them and I'm going to break up the situation, right? And everyone's going to be like, whoa, she spilled her coffee, right? And I know that sounds like a small thing, but that's one of my tools as a bystander to break up a situation. So again, like de-escalation, intervention, and social workers unite.
Thank you.
So from a healthcare perspective, I am just going to share a little bit of insight because we are not where, the healthcare system is not where it needs to be. And historically, that has been, the system has not historically been incentivized in the manner for health. It has been a business model. And so there has been a shift in how to incentivize healthcare so that historically you were sick, you go see your primary care, you get an intervention, you get treated for whatever ailment that you have. That doesn't necessarily get at why you were there to begin with. So if you are coming in, you have hypertension, you have high blood pressure, you get a pill that then corrects your high blood pressure. But there has not been incentivized, why do you have high blood pressure to begin with? So we are not there. The state is working to encompass more of the whole being, and to how do we look at the whole being to get at the root cause for why you have the condition that you have to begin with. So I think the root question was, so when we have a healthcare system with primary care providers that have more than 1,000 patient caseload, they are having to prioritize who they are seeing, how they are seeing, how much time is being spent seeing someone. And so I think at the root of it, we have a system that is not incentivized to look at the individual from a holistic perspective, but that is changing. And so I guess I would say, how that is changing now is that if I'm coming in as a mental health clinician, I can say I have expertise in symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, mood disorders, substance use disorders. I have that expertise, but I don't know how it impacts you as an individual. You are the expert on yourself. What are the circumstances that are contributing towards these symptoms? So I think more and more that's where healthcare is going, but the healthcare system is not there yet. But the system is being incentivized to look more at decreasing healthcare costs while increasing quality, but it's going to take a while to get there. But what I will say is that the process has started. The state has incentivized this within health care providers that take mass health and Medicare in general. So there is awareness of it, but it's going to take a long time to get there.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for that. A couple of folks mentioned that getting into the schools would be critical. And I was reminded that we actually invited the schools to join us today, but we did not get a response. So we tried. I'm so glad that we agreed to stay until 6 tonight because there are so many good questions. There are a number of questions about implicit bias training and bystander training. Barnstable No Place for Hate is an organization that offers that training. And so we can help communicate how to get in touch with that organization. And perhaps we'll consider facilitating some of that because there seems to be a lot of interest there. We're almost at 3:30. There's, can I ask Leslie one more question? How do we reach young adults and kids? Most of the attendees today are, I won't use that word, are senior.
Well, so I will say from the perspective of the Human Rights Advisory Commission, one of everyone's favorite activities that we do is our Human Rights Academy, which happens twice a year, and we bring students together from all of the schools across Cape Cod to talk about human rights issues. We have a student representative to our planning group for it, and we really do actively try to get student opinions about what those activities should be. And so that's great. I mean, that's our direct sort of connection. And the fact that I have 3 teenagers at home helps, right? But I think it is hard to connect with people whose experience is very different than yours. And that's something that we're all working on, right? And I mean, that's part of this conversation today. It is a specific, we're talking about race, but I will say that same gap exists when you're talking about people of different ages. And so, listening is the first thing. Now my teenagers, most of the time, they don't want to talk. So it's really hard for me to stand up here and say, yes, you got to listen to the young people, because the young people don't want to talk. Where are the young people communicating? They are communicating online. And we didn't really get into online hate, but there's a huge, huge rise in it. And it is a challenge that comes to us on the commission all the time. And that line between hate speech and free speech is very blurry. But young people are gathering in online spaces. And so if you want to know what young people are saying, have your children or your grandchildren sign you up for Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. That's where young people are communicating. And there are forums on a lot of these social media platforms where young people are gathering and they're talking about stuff. They're talking about hard stuff. There's lots of conversations about racism online, thoughtful conversations. But you have to be willing to be in their space. And that's hard. I mean, I'm not good with technology at all. The number of times that I hand my children my phone and say, help me, like I can't even count it. But that's how to stay connected. That's where to listen.
Actually, if y'all don't mind talking about how we can engage with the youth, we'll make that go around and just make that the final question.
I have to think about that one. I have to think about that one a little bit, but what I will say is that Outer Cape Health specifically does have staff that are going into school systems to make appointments with in pediatrics or with mental health. So I think that and this is not a new model, it's actually an old model that is being revisited. So bringing healthcare into school systems around mental health, around physical health, I think has been a mechanism to engage youth from a healthcare perspective.
Great, thank you.
So, being somewhat new to office, I often find myself, this is an ugly way of describing it, but stealing ideas from other DA's offices. And last January, or this past January, I read the Boston Globe one day, and there was an article about the Suffolk County DA that launched what was called the Youth Advisory Council in the schools there to try to get inside the schools. So I was like, great idea. I tasked a few people in the office that we should do that. We should run a youth advisory council. And we picked a pilot school to work with, and it was Nauset High School. And we ran it this past spring, and it was highly successful. We've now come up with an idea to return back in the fall. I think we had 5 students on our council, 4 of returning, just the rising seniors. And what we're looking to do is meet in September and October to come up with some topics to discuss. I think they still use this term, a school assembly. I might be dating myself a little bit, but we would like our Youth Advisory Council to lead a conversation with their entire student body, fill the auditorium, with whatever the important topic is for them. We did quickly learn we should not be telling them what needs to be discussed. They tell us what's the topic to talk about. So we are looking forward to doing that, and we believe we'll be at the point of expanding beyond Nauset and going to Monomoy. So we're pretty excited about that.
I think assembly is okay. When you say recess, that's when.
I think it's important that we give our youngsters an opportunity to express themselves. And just a quick story, about a year and a half ago, we decided to invite a group of students over from Nauset Middle School just to have a conversation. So I brought in maybe 3 or 4 of our younger officers, and I was there, and a group of maybe 10 to 12 students came over. The disgust that they had for us was overwhelming. And I was really taken back by it. And I'm like, wow, what are we doing wrong? We have to, again, I keep saying it, but use this as an opportunity we need to fix that. And how do we do that? So we started with a conversation. They brought up a lot of really good points. Some of them were real. Some of them were real issues. I'm sorry, is it still off? I think I'm dying. Check.
Do you mind?
Time to go? Is that it? The big hook?
Who did that?
Just real. When we're talking about, real versus, something that's perceived, a perceived issue. It really, at the end of the day, does it matter? We still have to respond. And that's what our officers did. We responded to their concerns. That's something that we need to build upon. It started out as a very difficult conversation. Again, the disgust that they had for their uniformed personnel, these officers that cared deeply about these kids. We were able to turn it around a little bit, but we got some work to do. and we're going to continue to do so.
Thank you. Well, we are so fortunate to have leaders like this in our community that really care. And it's impossible to thank you all enough for being here. We appreciate your preparation, your engagement, your transparency today, your candor. That's what makes a difference. That's what helps us understand and will help us make a difference. You've given us a vision of where racism lies on the Cape and perhaps what we can do, which is no small task. I'd like to add to Rod's opening remarks, and he said that we're here today to listen and to learn, and that's true. It's also a starting point. In addition to listening and learning and growing a bit, we would love for all of you to leave here today and take action. Listening and learning is nice, as someone else said, but that alone doesn't help others, and that doesn't drive change. And we hope that today you'll leave here ready to engage and ready to take some action. Downstairs, you'll find the voting information that Rod mentioned. There's a table with information from the Barnstable County Human Rights Commission. And on the way out, you can get a list of, what do we call it? The Do More page. It's a list of organizations that support minority groups that can give you a heads up on how to get started and how to make a difference. So please take some action. Be an advocate. Send postcards inspiring people to vote. We have this list of organizations that support minority groups. See where you can get involved and make a difference. Maybe it's a donation at first. Maybe it's choosing a vendor of color. Maybe it's looking at a website to learn more about an issue and then getting involved and being an advocate. So today was largely to listen, to learn, but also hopefully to inspire you all to act. And thank you all for being here on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And thank you so much to our panelists and to the committee and to Mark. So thank you, everyone.